Welcome everybody back to another chapter, I believe is a good way to put it, of Red Dress and Smoking Gun. Yeah, finally picked a name for it. Probably not the greatest name, but you know, it works. Thank you for the people who watched the last one, and for the people who watched this one, and just if you watch my videos in general, thank you. Thank you to all my patrons who make doing what I do possible. If you want to support me monetarily, in the description is a link to my Patreon where you get exclusive content. I don't post much on any of my other social platforms except Patreon, so they get like weekly art pieces, while almost everything else doesn't. So if you actually want to see more of my art and stuff, and exclusive content again, you can check that. Yeah, content warning, there is going to be violence, mentionings of blood, guns, so if you cannot handle those kind of topics or just are not feeling in the mood, please do not watch this video. Take care of yourself first. With that out of the way, let's get into it. The noonday crowd pushed each other through the sidewalk, the dozen or so people eager to get to wherever they needed to go. Mina slightly adjusted her blue cloche hat, allowing most of the crowd to go ahead of her. The afternoon was sunny and the city was bustling around her. It was a great day to go to Roxanne's boutique, Mina mused as she started across the street as well. She loved going to Roxanne's. The confident wolf animatronic had the best in fashion advice. Since Mina found she was burning through quite a few outfits a week due to her unique ventures, a trip to Roxanne's on Thursdays was almost routine. She was halfway across the street when time slowed down. Almost everyone had made it to the other side when the sound of thunder rang out. That was odd. It wasn't raining, was it? Mina craned her head up to look at the sky as something hit her in the back, pushing her down to hit her knees against the cobblestone. The thunder had made Mina's ears ring, and the ringing was quickly joined by a lady screaming and a kid crying. What's the matter? It took a moment to register, but then pain blossomed from Mina's back like a red fire that burned up all the nerve endings. It radiated from one specific place, and Mina had to choke back a curse. This was 1,000 times worse than the painful jump landing. Her sight began to blur for a second, but she blinked back her focus. Gritting her teeth, she turned to look behind her. On the opposite side of the road where Mina had just walked from was a man. A man in a large trench coat, fedora low over his eyes, and a smoking gun pointed straight at her. A grin stretched across Mina's face as the puzzle pieces started to click together. This was a hitman. He had tried to kill her with one well-placed bullet, but seeing as she was still alive, he centered his aim again, this time at her head. Oh, this was wonderful, Mina thought, dodging the next bullet that came for her brain. It took more effort to move her head to the side. The bullet did whiz right past her ear, missing. Someone has noticed my little escapades, and they care enough to want me dead. She drew out her pistol from her purse. Another thundercrack rang out, but as she tried to dodge it, her back screamed at her, making her hesitate. A new pain blossomed from her upper leg. This guy was good. Seeing as she was too quick to hit, he was trying to slow her down to guarantee enough good shots to keep her down permanently. Unfortunately, not good enough. Mina smirked as she jerked her gun up. Before he could get another blow off, Mina fired 3. All of them landed dead center in his chest. The momentum pushed him back and he landed on the sidewalk, a crimson puddle already forming where he lay. Satisfied, Mina put away her smoking pistol back into her purse. She turned to hobble out of the middle of the road as cars started driving by again. Most everyone who had walked across the street had vanished, running as soon as the first shot rang out. However, there was one crumpled, shaking ball that hadn't moved. It was a boy, lying in the middle of the road, covering his head in his hands. The poor thing was still in his school uniform, knapsack slung across his back. He didn't look hurt, but the fear that froze him to the ground would, if a car hit him. Mina rushed over as quickly as her injuries allowed. She may be a cold cars swerved around her, her height as an adult, making it easier to see, unlike the boy who looked nothing more than a large rock. "Come on, get up," Mina coaxed, firmly pulling the school child up by his rucksack. He whimpered, legs buckling ever so slightly as she tried to stand him up. "Hurry up. The guns are gone, but you need to get off the road," she said again, and resorted to guiding and dragging the child to the sidewalk. The movement made it hard for him to get his footing, but he did start to walk on his own as Mina guided him to the sidewalk. Then she pulled him into an alley, away from any potential prying eyes that would try to assassinate Mina again. The boy stood, eyes squeezed shut, lips quivering as he tried to swallow back his sobs. Mina crouched, wincing at the motion that made both of her bullet wounds enraged, and quickly gave him a once-over. He was young, about elementary school age. His hair was ruffled blonde, a cap seemingly missing. His knees were scuffed from his fall, but otherwise looked unharmed, shaken, frightened, but not hurt. Hey, are you okay?" Mina asked, brushing aside the hair that had fallen in front of his eyes. All she got as a reply was the dam of tears breaking, and the boy started crying. His wet gasps of air as he tried to breathe through his wails sounded like sad hiccups, and Mina's heart almost broke. The little guy had just been through the scare of his life, and the only one who was there for him was some strange lady. From the looks of his school uniform, he was from a well-off neighborhood where the only sort of violence around would be the kids playing cops and robbers. It was doubtful if he had even heard a gun go off before, never mind several shots coming from 5 feet away from him. Shaking, the boy tried in vain to stifle the tears that fell, but the shame of not being stoic enough was easily overpowered by his shock. Mina paused, unsure of how to comfort the boy. The bustle of the street beside them was loud, people still in a panic. The police had to have been called by now, and she needed to get out of there. She couldn't just take the boy. That would be kidnapping. And there was no way she would just leave him here. Mina closed her eyes, willing herself to use her power of insight. She needed to find out who the boy was. Any information about him could be used. Energy swelled up inside her mind as the world melted away, her focus on the boy. Gradually, she began to know things about the boy. Vague shapes reminiscent of a house, the khaki pants of a parent, and his name, Jonathan. Pain jerked her back to the present, her connection to the boy broken. She gritted her teeth as the throbbing hole in her leg protested. Anything that grounded her made her power significantly harder to use. But she got what she needed. There was just enough hints about the kid for Mina to work with. "Jonathan, you were very brave. I know the sounds were very loud and it was scary, but you protected yourself like a champ. Your father would be really proud of you," she gently said, putting in extra energy into her encouragement. Jonathan grew quieter in surprise, his wailing becoming sniffles. You know my dad?" "Absolutely. And I know that he would be very pleased to know how you acted back there. That was some quick thinking," Mina lied. She was taking the risk that Jonathan's dad was dead or abusive, but how the kid's tears had stopped and his eyes looked hopeful, the risk seemed to have paid off. "You know what? I think that because you were such a brave young man, you deserve a treat." She began to rifle in her handbag, praying that she still had the snack she had stashed away for later. Jonathan's eyes shone, only small hiccup sniffles remaining. He intently watched Mina's hand as she located something small and tugged it out triumphantly. "Ah, here you go." She grinned and handed him a nicely wrapped candy bar. Without a moment of hesitation, he snatched it from her and scarfed it down. Sweet candy worked wonders on any mood, and Jonathan was soon smiling, though it was weak. His eyes betrayed his want for more, but now that he was a bit calmer, he remembered some manners. "Thank you," he muttered, looking down at his shoes. "You are very welcome," Mina chuckled lightly. "I don't have any more rate on me, but I think I might have $1 for you to use when you get home." Jonathan looked at her, eyes wide and mouth agape. It took a lot of self-control for Mina not to outright laugh. You'd have thought she had just promised to give him a mountain of chocolate. Which, considering how much $1 was worth here, she supposed he could get quite a bit of candy for it. She rifled in her bag again, then motioned for Jonathan to hold his hand out. Eagerly, he thrusted out his hand. Carefully, Mina placed the small coin in his palm. Eyes as big as saucers and sparkling, he gazed at it as Mina made him curl his hand to keep it safe. He held onto it tightly, as if his life depended on protecting his new treasure. Outside of the alley, Mina heard some sort of new commotion. Groaning, she stood up. The protests of her injuries were getting almost too much for her to bear, but she peeked around the corner to see what was happening. She motioned to Jonathan to stay put, and he watched her. What she saw was mostly pedestrians milling about, many avoiding to look or touch the corpse that laid in the ground. However, there was one person who had taken an interest in the body. Crouching low to examine the man was Detective Sun. He must have come in his own vehicle, as Mina hadn't heard any incoming sirens yet. Nevertheless, he was periodically looking at the man, then the stain of Mina's own blood in the middle of the moving road. The detective seemed perplexed, but determined to solve this new crime. As he made the motion of standing up, Mina ducked back into the alley and out of sight, sighing in relief. She had no plan on how to get Jonathan home, her obvious, bloody injuries making her a terrible escort. However, with Sun now on the scene, she could direct Jonathan to him. He may have been her rival, but Sun and his brother were mighty fine at being good, law-abiding protectors of the city. There was no one she would rather trust with the young boy, besides the vigilante. She went back to Jonathan, who was watching her intently. Making sure he could not see her blood the best she could, she smiled warmly. Not bothering to crouch again, she opted to instead just bend over a bit to get a bit closer to his height. "Hey Jonathan, can you do something for me?" The boy nodded, a bit hesitant. "Wonderful. I need you to go out onto the street again. There's a very nice detective out there. His name is Sun, and he's an animatronic with a funny smile." She pushed on the corners of her mouth to make her grin wide and goofy, a little bit like how Sun looked. Jonathan giggled. "He's very tall, but I know you won't be scared of him because of how brave you are, right?" Mina winked as if she had just told him a secret. Jonathan nodded enthusiastically. "I knew you were super brave. So, when you go to him, I'd like you to tell him that you need help getting home. I know you are a brave young man who can take care of yourself, but this way, you get to go on a car ride and be extra safe. Okay? Can you do that for me?" Jonathan nodded, his little mouth set in a determined line. Mina straightened up quickly, despite the pain radiating on her back. Carefully, she guided him towards the entryway of the alley. With one final encouraging motion for him to get going, Jonathan sprinted off to find the detective. Logically, Mina knew that the boy was smart enough to follow her instructions, and that it was too risky to peek her head out and look. But she needed to make sure. Quickly, Mina pulled out a little pocket mirror from her jacket and angled it around the corner. It didn't take long to find Jonathan, and as she suspected, he had made it to Sun easily. He started talking to the detective, who, while surprised at the young boy, didn't seem to be dismissing him. In fact, the detective was being quite courteous, while subtly drawing Jonathan's attention away from the obvious dead body that he had covered with his own jacket. They talked, but Mina was too far away to hear anything. Finally, Sun nodded, and Mina sighed in relief. She could now rest assured that the young boy was in good hands. Mina almost put the mirror away, but before she began to lower it, the detective seemed to ask a question. Jonathan nodded, excitedly, and then pointed straight at the alleyway. Mina's heart skipped a beat as Sun quickly jerked his smiling faceplate to look in her direction. Instantly, she jerked down the mirror. Snapping it closed, she took off running down the alley as she put it back into her jacket. Her injuries screamed, but by now Mina had surmised that they weren't nearly enough for her to be in danger. If the bullets had impacted her like she was a normal human, the first bullet would have quite easily pierced right through her and into her lungs. Though painful and bleeding quite a bit, the bullet had only sunk in enough that the end of it was still poking through her skin. It was the same for the other one on her thigh. While both were gushing enough blood to ruin the nice jacket and dress she had, she was sure she could make it home in time before she lost a significant amount. As she ran through the side streets, she absently bemoaned that she hadn't gotten to Roxy's before the shooting. She really could have used an extra outfit right about now. Then came the sobering thought that she likely wouldn't be able to go anywhere consistently. Now that she had made enough enemies that had the resources in malice to want her dead, she would have to be more careful and erratic with her movements. After leaping over a small wall, she slowed down enough to ease the pain in her limbs. She had run enough. If Sun had been chasing her, he'd have given up by now, she hoped. The little power she was capable of using drained away as the pain came back with a fury. When she put pressure on the injured leg, it buckled, and she almost fell down to the muddy cobblestone, but she caught her balance in time. Groaning, Mina limped down the street. She had seen far weaker beings survive greater wounds. She would be darned if she couldn't make it to her home. So, limping, she went through the familiar alleys until she reached the back entry to the poor apartment. The pain was more of an ache when she got to her room, dangerously dulled by lightheadedness. Shrugging off her ruined jacket and letting it thud against the wooden floor, she dragged herself to her kitchenette cabinets. She had thankfully enough of a rare foresight to stash up on medical supplies when she had realized she could be hurt. Pulling out some bandages and a bottle of vodka she had managed to purchase, she grimaced. This was gonna hurt.
Baby, can you move around the rhythm so we can get within just a